Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2021 movie titled Castle Falls. Please be advised that there might be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to Mike, an MMA fighter retiring from competitive fighting due to aging and a catastrophic shoulder injury. Faced with financial difficulties, he begs his former manager for one more chance. However, Mike's manager points out his age and recent string of defeats. Mike, motivated by a desire for money, insists on challenging another fighter. Mike initially leads the fight but eventually tires, allowing his opponent to win, shattering Mike's confidence in his own greatness. He quits fighting because he is broke and without a place to live, effectively ending his career. In search of a job, he begins working on a construction site as part of the team evicting Castle High Hospital. Mike must now rebuild his life away from combat. Elsewhere in the city, Richard struggles financially while caring for his daughter Emily, who has leukemia. Richard cannot afford to pay Emily's home caretaker as her medical bills continue to rise. The hospital then informs him that Emily needs further chemotherapy, which will cost $400,000, a figure Richard cannot afford because his insurance is maxed out. Richard is left frantic, unsure how to raise the finances necessary to preserve Emily's life. In a federal prison, Lando, a black inmate, engages in a heated argument with another prisoner who is asking him about some concealed cash. The scene quickly becomes violent, with the prison warden remaining mute while Damien and his men attack Lando. Returning to Mike, he is shown lost in thought, reflecting on his rapid decline from a celebrated MMA warrior to a construction worker with a low paycheck. His employer, observing Mike's lack of concentration, scolds him harshly, emphasizing the need of completing their work before Castle High is demolished. The city's mayor is also making a formal declaration to the media. He says that Castle High Hospital will be emptied in 2 days to make room for a new sports complex, leaving little time for anyone to respond. Lando is watching the news from jail and is astonished to learn about Castle High Hospital's swift evacuation. He instantly requests to see the chief warden, who happens to be Richard. Without delay, Lando makes a bold offer. He recommends paying Richard money in exchange for his relocation to a different jail block in the south. This money could be just what Richard needs to pay for Emily's emergency medical care. But when Lando brings up Emily's grave health condition, Richard becomes enraged and, in a fit of fury, punches Lando. The next day, Richard covertly meets with Lando and urgently inquires about the money he mentioned. Lando confesses that he once stole $3 million from Damien, and the money is buried at Castle High Hospital, which is due to be demolished. Lando claims he does not desire the money for himself. He wishes to assist Richard in obtaining funds for his daughter's medical treatment. He merely asks for Richard's assistance in getting him to the South Block to avoid Damien and his gang's incessant attacks. After some thought, Richard agrees to go along with Lando's idea. Unbeknownst to them, one of the jail wardens, covertly working with Damien, learns about Richard's plot to relocate Lando to the South Block. This revelation means that Damien and his associates will no longer be able to attack Lando. When Damien discovers this, he immediately thinks that Lando has recruited Richard to retrieve the buried money, assuming that Richard requires a huge sum of cash. Damien promptly contacts his brother Deacon, who is now operating Damien's drug company while he is in prison. During a break at the construction site, Mike strikes up a casual conversation with another worker, George. George admits that he didn't want to be a low-wage construction worker, but he had little alternative because he has a wife and 2 children to care for. Mike then discusses his prior life as an MMA fighter, but now he's broke and working any job he can to make ends meet. George is astonished to learn that Mike was once a well-known fighter, especially since his children are fans of Mike. Mike is forced to sleep in his car, which is parked outside Castle High Hospital, because he has nowhere else to dwell. Elsewhere in the city, Deacon and his girlfriend, Kat, keep a careful eye on the hospital that is due to be dismantled. They intend to sneak in once the construction workers depart for the day. Back at the job site, as they work, George tells Mike about his ambition of moving to Alaska with his family, and even proposes that Mike consider traveling there himself. While cleaning a room on his own, Mike discovers a bag full of money. It turns out that this is the money Lando stashed before going to prison. When their shift is over, George advises Mike to go soon. Mike maintains his discovery a secret, taking $100 from the bag and hiding it, intending to return for it after everyone else has left. At the same time, Deacon prepares his troops to breach into Castle High Hospital. They are waiting for Richard, as Lando had told him where the money is. Deacon and his squad intend to disguise themselves as construction workers to avoid drawing notice. Meanwhile, Richard is getting ready to travel to Castle High, telling his daughter he has some pressing job to complete. At the same moment, Mike, who is standing in line with George to sign out, pretends that he left his jacket at the building site and decides to return to grab it. He hands him the $100 note and rushes back to the site. Upon entering Castle High, Mike finds the money he discovered before, precisely where he left it. He pauses to count it, convinced that he is the only one aware of its existence. However, at the same time, Richard enters Castle High, and one of Deacon's staff notices him and immediately alerts Deacon. Deacon and his squad enter the building from the left side. Unexpectedly, they come into a construction worker who has been assigned to keep an eye on the site until the eviction time. To avoid issues, Kat immediately eliminates the construction worker. Meanwhile, Richard, following Lando's directions, ascends to the 6th floor and uncovers explosives designed to bring the building down in few hours. Meanwhile, Deacon and his team split out in search of Richard. At the same time, Mike in one of the rooms notices Richard. He hastily places the money back in the bag and begins to leave. As he walks down the stairs, he notices Deacon's men heading upstairs, leading him to turn back. Richard then discovers a letter on the floor indicating that someone has taken the money. Mike unintentionally kicks an iron rod, causing a loud noise. Richard hears it, but he's not alone. Deacon and his team also hear it and believe it's Richard. Mike hides, realizing that others are chasing the money, and he notices Richard doing the same to evade Deacon and his group. Then Deacon and his men's attention is drawn to another intruder, who turns out to be George, who is hunting for Mike after he failed to return. When Kat discovers a note in George's pocket, she assumingly believes he knows about the money. Deacon and his colleagues begin torturing George to obtain information, despite the fact that George has no idea about the money. Mike, who is hidden, is powerless to intervene while events unfolds. Because George refuses to provide any information, Deacon instructs his men to kill him. Mike, overcome with desperation and rage over George's death, mistakenly exposes himself, resulting in his capture by Deacon's group. Mike, feeling bad over George's death, decides to exact his retribution. After hiding the money, Mike defeats several of Deacon's guys. However, he quickly finds himself surrounded by Kat and her team. Mike makes a daring escape through a garbage chute, but Richard, who is nearby, apprehends him immediately. Richard attacks Mike with a knife and demands to know where the money is. Mike maintains that he is only a construction worker who knows nothing about money. When Richard loses focus, Mike strikes him, resulting in a heated battle between them. Their fight is broken up when one of Deacon's men intervenes, brandishing a gun at them. Mike and Richard work fast together to disarm the gunman during a brief interruption. With more of Deacon's men arriving, they run quickly. Deacon instructs his men to block all exits from the building and attempts to negotiate with Mike, offering to spare his life in exchange for money. However, Mike declines the offer and insists to confront Deacon's troops personally. Mike, confined, makes a daring escape by jumping out of a window and clings to thick curtains. Mike struggles to get back inside the building as Deacon's team shoots at him from below. Once inside, he encounters Kat, who is pointing a gun at him. Just in time, Richard steps in, hitting Kat, who gets near the window. Deacon's men continue shooting, believing Mike is at the window, only to discover they have accidentally hit Kat, who tragically dies from the fall. Overwhelmed by his girlfriend's death, Deacon promises to ensure Mike and Richard do not leave the building unhurt. While they're hidden, Richard helps Mike with an arm injury and queries him about the money again. Mike maintains his narrative, claiming that he is only a construction worker and has no knowledge of the money. As they face off against the rest of Deacon's crew, Mike and Richard effectively eliminate all of the remaining threats. In a moment of tremendous stress, Mike aims a gun at Richard, thinking him of being an undercover member of Deacon's group. Richard firmly rejects this, stating that he is only involved because he can no longer pay his daughter's medical treatment. Mike, seeing Richard's precarious condition, uses a walkie-talkie to summon Deacon to come upstairs and fetch the money. Then Mike goes to find the concealed money and agrees to split it with Richard. Richard advises Mike to leave the building soon, but Mike is determined to avenge George's death by defeating Deacon and his men. Richard warns him that Castle High is set to be blown up, which might kill Deacon and his gang. Mike considers his options and decides to abandon his revenge plan in favor of escaping with Richard. At the same time, the mayor and other construction workers prepare to demolish Castle High in just 15 minutes. Deacon and one of his last soldiers pursue Mike and Richard as they attempt to escape through the building's roof. This leads to a gunfight, in which Mike must dodge Deacon's blows. Mike encourages Richard to go ahead while he confronts Deacon alone. Deacon tells his men to block the exit, trapping Richard and the money. When Mike runs out of ammo, he challenges Deacon to a hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile, Richard kills Deacon's final henchman and escapes in their truck. Mike ultimately defeats Deacon and collects the money. With Castle High about to be demolished, Mike has no choice but to hop aboard Richard's truck. Meanwhile, Deacon, who is still alive, attempts to collect the money scattered across the roof. As they drive away, the structure crumbles behind them, leaving Deacon's fate uncertain. A few days later, Mike chooses to use some of the money to help George's family cope with their loss. Remembering George's proposal, he embarks on a fresh journey to Alaska. Meanwhile, Richard accepts Lando's request and relocates Damien to the prison's South Block. This move is exactly what Lando wanted, as he intends to exact his own revenge on Damien. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.